And so Paul A. Laviolette, the book that I read was called Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And like I said, to me, it was neither propulsion nor anti-gravity. Even Mr. Laviolette says so himself, because propulsion is basically making use of Newton's Stadler law of motion, as people know it in popular science as for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Whereas you explode a fuel, a propellant, right? We get the word propulsion from, right? It explodes through a nozzle, hits the ground, and the force that it pushes against the ground pushes back in equal opposite reaction, and therefore you get the liftoff. And this is not that in the book Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. Hello, Brandon.
Hello, Brandon. Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, great. Finally joined.
Excellent.
Okay, nice to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that we finally got to connect. It's been quite a while that we've connected through, the work of Dr. LaViolette, and then through, I've seen you. I got involved on ResearchGate,
Yeah.
and it's been interesting because unfortunately, one of the things that happened since we made contact was Dr. LaViolette passed away.
Yeah, that's right. We made contact in September 22, and he
Yeah.
passed away on the 19th of December 22.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
He had
So
he had quite a long battle with cancer. So
yeah.
when we met him about 6 years ago, met up with him over online, he was trying to deal with the cancer that he had.
Yeah.
But he came to
Um,
most of our. We had meetings every Sunday from around December 2018 up to 2020, round about May 2022, and he came to most of the meetings.
Definitely an interesting fellow. I mean, I read, as I was saying earlier, his book. The first book I read was Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, and in the section in that book where he talks about an etheric explanation, and then he starts to talk about SubQuantum kinetics and the etheron interactions. I thought it was fascinating, and I bought several of his other books. The second one I got was, of course, the book titled SubQuantum Kinetics. Earth Under Fire, Genesis of the Cosmos, Message from the Pulsars. I mean, just some really amazing work. And but it's subquantum kinetics and the free energy implications of that we're going to be talking about today. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he was very prolific. He produced a lot of work. He was very prolific production in his lifetime. Um,
And how did you get involved first with Dr. LaViolette?
Well, I was doing a PhD in a London university from 2013 to 2017, and then I did a postdoc after that in electromagnetism and tomography. But I originally wanted to do the PhD in subquantum kinetics, and then I realised that I wouldn't be able to do that, so I just did conventional physics. And then I got in contact with him around about February 2018. I sent him an email, and a little bit later he replied, and then I sort of asked him if I could do some work for him, some voluntary work for him, and he gave me the names and emails of people who were interested in his work, and from them we set up the Model G group on a Facebook page. So that was around about February, March 2018, and we were communicating via Facebook for a number of months, and then in round about December 2018, we started communicating via Zoom meetings. Zoom online video meetings once a week for on a Sunday, and now we do it on a Saturday. And we did.
Specifically, oh, sorry. Just did you specific? What specific did you specialize in? Any specific branch of physics for your PhD?
It was classical electromagnetism
Okay, got it.
and tomography. Tomography. It was to do with using alternating magnetic fields to image inside metallic
Um,
boxes. And I did a master's degree in particle physics 2004 and a BSc in physics in 2002.
yeah, one of the pioneers of course, as you know, in electromagnetism is James Clerk Maxwell with his very hefty dual treatise, Volume One and Two, on electromagnetism.
Yep. There's a kind of thing going round about the fact that he had a number of equations more than what they show in conventional physics,
Right,
that they reduced his equations for the sort of standard physics, and that he had I think it was about four more equations that he originally had. But I don't know a lot about it. But Paul has basically he he was dissatisfied with the conventional physics when he was studying it at university, and then a bit later on, round about his PhD, I think it was round about 1973, he had this idea of a kind of like visionary experience where he saw that that physics could be explained in terms of the ether, of an ether.
right,
This was the open reaction diffusion system of Model G, which he got from the chemistry model of the bruslator, which you can see it's a standard theory in chemistry. It's just not
right.
very well known. It's not very well known in chemistry. Most chemists don't know about it.
For people listening, you said Model G. Now, this Model G is has to do with his subquantum kinetics that he developed, right?
Yeah, that's his model of his model of subquantum kinetics on the microscopic scale.
And Model
So
G is one of the types of interactions that the etherons go through. It's an etheron the process that they have a specific sequence that they interact with each other, right?
yeah, so I'm just getting some pictures up so I can guide me a
Yeah,
bit. So Model G was based on the brusselator, but with an extra G component to make it into an ether model. So the brusselator was developed. It was first put forward. This open reaction system was first put forward by Alan Turing in 1952. So he was looking for an open reaction system to explain the symmetry breaking stage of embryonic development. So that's when the first this when chemists and mathematicians first started investigating open reaction systems. And then in 1958, Belousov discovered a solution containing bromide ions, malonic acid, sulfuric acid, and a small amount of Ceros ions that will spontaneously oscillate as an open reaction system. So then we go on to the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction, which is basically it's a chemical solution which produces these chemical waves, and these chemical waves they're very unusual. They nothing seems to create them. They seem to just create themselves.
spontaneously is the term he used as well, right?
Spontaneous. Nothing seems to create them. They seem to just create themselves. And this, I think chemists either don't like it or don't haven't really heard of it because
Yeah.
it seems to be breaking the laws of thermodynamics. I think the first
Now,
law that
now,
gone.
Brendan, I'm going to slow you down too because anybody listening, I've been involved with Dr. LaViolet's work for years, but I want to make sure that people are clear when you talked about these um, these different reactions, and you mentioned the Zabatini reaction. These are the names of scientists, is why we're calling them that, correct?
Yeah, the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction is where Paul first got his idea
And he
for
does
modern.
actually mention that he mentions both of that reaction in Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, as well as extensively he refers to them in SubQuantum Kinetics, the book.
Subcontinents and Genesis of the Cosmos. Yeah,
Yeah,
Genesis of the
that is,
Cosmos is more kind of for the general public, whereas
yeah,
Subquantum Kinetics book is more for the scientist, more for the professional scientist. But it's quite well written. I mean, quite a lot of people would be able to get a decent understanding from it.
yeah. I think so. I actually just dove straight into when I first got Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, and I attempted. I actually his that book actually forced me to improve my mathematics education much more because there were a lot of equations in just that book. And I was wondering, I said, what is this book doing in Barnes and Nobles? This is what I thought when I saw it.
Yeah.
And, um, it came out, what was it, 1998 or something like that? No,
The
no, this was
the
2010. 2010.
I think the anti
2010.
gravity one came out in 2008, and the subquantum kinetics came out in 1994. But he had
Right,
written
that's what
papers.
I got mixed up.
They've
Yeah.
written papers
So,
in the 80s, in the 1980s.
Secret, yeah, Secret of Anti-Gravity Propulsion was 2008. That's correct. I actually just did a talk on that because I was looking at some papers from the Army Research Laboratory, NASA, and then some guys from Portugal and Brazil. They were looking at uh, thrusters that were asymmetric capacitors based off of the
Mhm.
work. They never mentioned Dr. LaViolette, which is something I find really interesting in a lot of the research with the asymmetric capacitors that are using extremely high voltage. They'll mention T. Townsend Brown, which of course Dr. LaViolette talks about in his books. But and you look at all of his letters and things that he's had with various scientists, with NASA, and he's had a lot of contact with everybody. And then also, his claims that he's made, where he shows that predictions that were made using subquantum kinetics that have then been verified in physics, but it doesn't seem to be cited by anyone, which is I find this kind of curious. But I
Yeah,
don't want
I
to get
mean,
too much into that yet.
he was kind of sidelined by the academic
Yeah,
community. He was quite, I mean, almost persecuted to a certain extent. But I'm just getting up this because I'm doing the sixth edition of the SQK book. I'm just correcting typographical errors and making it an easier read. I'm just getting this book up here. So uh, um,
I'm gonna need to get a new copy of that from you, by the way, because I had ordered one. I can't remember what edition it was some years ago directly from his site, and I had some contact with Dr. LaViolette. We had a little correspondence back and forth, and he had to send me another copy of it.
yeah,
Um,
this will be a hardback copy in color, about 570 pages, and it will have an index as well. So,
Definitely need to get that.
and you get
But
a free PDF with it as well with the hardback book. So the hardback book will probably go on sale for about $89. I mean, it cost about $35 to $40 to print it.
yeah,
So, and and people will get a free PDF along with that. They can also buy the PDF separately if they want to for about $35.
well, that's definitely a copy that I'm going to need to get. So keep me posted about that. But we were talking about these reactions, right? And the Zhabotinsky and Belousov reactions, and this is where he saw that he was having these spontaneous reactions that weren't found anywhere else, and that nobody that he could find was talking about. And this
Yeah,
is what helped him to start to begin to develop subquantum kinetics.
yeah, that's right. So he was going through the literature at the time, and he came across the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction and also Alan Turing's open reaction systems. And this was the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction is around about is kind of like 1958 to 1970. So I was actually, just as a strange coincidence, when I was working at university in the office that I was working at, there was another guy there, another um, research director there who was working in. He had a background in physics, but he was working in geology, and he was interested in the Brusselator and the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction. And I'd been reading Paul's book at the time, and he said, "Come over here, Brendan. I want to show you something." He showed me this reaction, like they show in the pictures of Paul's book,
Yeah.
the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction. I said, "Look at this. What do you think of this?" I said, "All right, chemical waves, Belousov-Zhabotinsky." He said, "How did you know that?" I just mentioned Paul's work. He said, "I've spoken to professors of chemistry who've been studying the subject for 40 years and they've never heard of it." Later on, I asked him how many professors of chemistry. He said about 12, and they'd
Wow.
never heard of it. So it's been sidelined in chemistry. You can see it on Wikipedia, but
Right.
it's not, it is a subject in chemistry, but it's not well known in chemistry. It's barely known at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a bit of a coincidence. And he thought that most microscopic rock crystals were based on chemical waves. Um, so Paul was looking at this, and he thought he just came up with this because the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction are chemical waves. They're like an open system. And Paul had the idea that if he just adapted the Brusselator, which describes these waves, so the Brusselator is like a schematic that shows how these chemical waves, approximation of how these chemical waves are behaving. And it's a little bit complicated. It's not very complicated, but it shows you've got inputs of A chemicals, and then your inputs of B, then you're getting X and Y, and then outputting with Z and omega. And I think what Paul thought was that after looking at this for a while, because he was thinking this could be able to maybe explain his ether hypothesis, which he got. He had a kind of mystical experience when he was at university and saw, and all this came together, and he saw how it could be the ether. So Paul added an extra G component to make model G, and where the G represents the G etherons, and the X and Y represent the G represent the G etherons for the gravity field, and the X and the Y represent the electric field, whose spatial displacement produces the magnetic field. And then the inputs of A and the inputs of B, and the outputs of Z and the outputs of omega, these are just other etherons which somehow come from nowhere. I mean, you could say they come from the ether, like the 0 point
Right.
energy fluctuation, the zero, or you could think of them coming from a higher dimension. They just come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and then they
Now,
return to nowhere
I'd
and
like to
produce.
mention something because you said that, and I also read this in, I think, Genesis of the Cosmos. He mentions this. He talks about how it's related to tarot and things like that, because you just said he had a mystical experience, and this is why he wanted to continue looking for how these interactions were representative of how these spontaneous reactions were arising from the ether. But I think it's also worth mentioning that the previous scientist and author that I mentioned, um, he also, at the end of his book, James Clerk Maxwell, in his treatise of electricity and magnetism, at the end of the first treaty of electricity and magnetism, he says basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he says my entire aim in this entire treatise was to try to elucidate to you the medium, the ether, through which this electromagnetic force is propagating. That's
Yep.
what he was saying. So, it's not like Paul Elevai. I mean, I know a lot of scientists at the time and people have tried to, you know, disprove it. And then there was even the Michelson-Morley experiment, and, trying to say the ether let's either prove it or disprove it. But very serious, very well-known scientists like James Clerk Maxwell, who knows if we would have had those four equations put together in the way that he did if it weren't for him.
Yeah,
Nikola Tesla,
I think it was an extra four. I think it was an extra four equations. So standard physics has four equations for Maxwell's equations. And I think there's something like, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's four that he originally had four more equations that described things that described maybe, I think maybe longitudinal wave propagation, whereas standard electromagnetism and Maxwell's equations describes transverse waves.
right?
Longer. So anyway, but um, and I think it was Heaviside who kind of altered them in the, I
Right.
can't
Oliver
remember,
Heaviside, yeah,
in the
Oliver
19,
Heaviside annotated them to make it more neat, and basically it combines three equations from three other scientists and one original of Maxwell, supposedly, that describes the size and the field of the electricity, and the same with magnetism. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't, so I don't think he was doing anything crazy. When I looked at Paul Violet's work, that was actually one of the first things I did. Was I hunted down and found James Clerk. I started beefing up my mathematics, and then I hunted down James Clerk Maxwell's work and started reading through that. And I was just surprised at the things that I was seeing. Um, and
yeah,
you're
I
right;
mean,
the longitudinal wave equations are missing from his work.
yeah, it could be longitudinal. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's longitudinal. But I'll have to check that out. But Paul's does have, in Paul's work, in Paul's electric and gravitational ether, out of which comes the magnetism. That it was something that we're trying to look into. Um, uh, there is a kind of so the X and Y represent the electric field. So yeah, I mean, so it's I'm not 100% sure how close it is to Maxwell's equations as they are today in conventional physics work reasonably well within a limited framework, so they can explain a fair bit. But
Right.
Maxwell's original equations may have been able to explain much more. So um, so so Paul has basically, let me just has developed an ether model, which is an open reaction diffusion system, and uh, and we're basically, in our group, we're basically at the moment, I'm just editing the book, trying to get through editing the book. That's mainly what I'm spending my time on. But we were looking at a way to find vortical motion, a thermo, a fluid dynamics of the ether, so that an ether particle, a soliton particle, would be able to have vortical motion, and that this would be the sort of origin of magnetism, if you like. But
Now, when you say vortical motion, what do you mean by that?
that's that vortical motion is a kind of a twisting motion, a kind of like a vortices. So a vortices. So in conventional physics, they just have this kind of arrow that point. They have, for magnetism, they have spin, and a spin is kind of like a bit of an abstract form where you've got an up arrow or down arrow, and it's kind of fairly simplistic. With Paul's work, we're looking at sort of like vortices. So you've got, say, trillions of etherons making up a proton, and these are in a kind of. I'm not saying they exactly are that way because this is just a hypothesis. We haven't. There's a certain amount of evidence for it, but we haven't fully proven it yet. So, um, so like a vortice is like water going down a drain. That's a kind of vortex, or like a hurricane, like the vortices in a tornado. So we're trying to, at some point, trying to um, model this and then be able to show that this is what spin really is. It's not this simplistic, more, it's not very simplistic and conventional is fairly well thought through, and but they don't really understand what's, they just have a simple model for spin which can get a bit more complex, but
Yeah.
they don't really fully understand what spin is. They just assume it's something. Let me just,
And
they just
and
assume
so
it's
when you say
sorry.
spin, when you talk about spin, just so people understand, this is one of the quantum features of a particle, right?
Yeah,
So we have spin, charge can be another one of them, and so on, right?
yeah. So you've got up, spin down, and of these electrons and protons, and this spin is a bit of an abstract thing in quantum mechanics, and it basically it is describing the magnetic properties of materials. So it's representative of the magnetic, and they have a fairly sophisticated kind of mathematical description, and it works very well for quite a number of situations. So I'm not trying to downplay the conventional. The conventional is fairly sophisticated, but in order to understand more things like free energy or understand certain astronomical phenomena, then if we move to a model such as subquantum kinetics, it may well be that this is a better explanation.
So as far as now that we're really wanting to talk about free energy, and you just mentioned it, so a little bit of a segue to this question is: have you or any of your colleagues have there been any demonstrations, either publicly or privately, in any labs anywhere, where free energy has been able to be proven or demonstrated or even put into use?
Yeah, one of the guys in our group, he's vice president of the Starburst Foundation, and he's a professor at a university in Germany. I don't want to give his name just in case he doesn't want
Sure.
it, but he
Yeah.
is running his car on 25% HHO. So he's producing HHO at over unity, and he's running his car on 25% HHO mixed with petrol, and he's been doing this for a while. I mean, he doesn't understand the full over. He says getting HHO at over unity is not a problem. The problem is mixing the oxygen and hydrogen in the engine of the car to get it to get it to stop it. I think to get it to bond properly. And he says some of these technicians, some of these engineers or over free energy technicians that he's visited a number of them. They know the secret of how to do it, so that you get pure water. So it's no maybe a little bit of petrol, but basically just pure water running the car, which he can't do. But he can produce HHO at over unity. He says that's not a problem. He's not allowed it on campus. They won't allow him to bring the HHO on
Right.
campus. Also, Paul has seen
So
a number of these devices working. Um,
when you say over unity, I just want people to understand, are we talking about the fact that it is per- producing more energy than it gets, right? Than it put into it.
no, there's more energy coming out than you put in. So it's like say 7 times. It could be some of these devices can be. I think I'm just trying to remember. I think about over 1,000 times over unity. Over 1,000 times over unity. Let me see the Don Smith. The Don Smith device I was going to mention a bit about. So let me just see. Now I haven't made these devices, so I'm just going on what other people have, on what I think is correct, and what other people have done. Let me just see if I can find this. So
Would that be one of the main features of a free energy device or a free energy engine? Would be that it functions at over unity, meaning that it produces more energy than is being input into the system.
yeah, that's right. So basically, the with the water fueled cell, or the HHO hydroxy, or the HHO, which is what Stan Meyer is supposed to have produced. That is somehow that's going beyond standard physics. Standard physics can't explain that. That's impossible for standard physics. So maybe it's somehow tapping into the ether. You're just designing electronics and machinery that's tapping into the 0 point higher dimension, or just by some trick of coils or chemicals, it's somehow tapping it. So with the HHO, it seems to be like some kind of resonant frequency of the water molecule bond in this kind of electrolysis process. At some kind of resonant frequency, the oxygen hydrogen breaks apart very easily, very easily. It just breaks apart. Then if you burn the hydroxy gas, the oxygen hydrogen byproduct, you're getting much more energy out. I mean, maybe like 7 times, 5 times, 7 times, maybe much higher than that. You're getting, say for instance, 7 times much energy out than you put in. So you can loop the system. You can then use part of that energy to recharge a battery, and funnel the water vapor coming out of the exhaust, funnel it back into the cup, and basically you could, in theory, run the engine continuously. You just keep going until the parts wear down. That's what I
Right.
understand of it. But there's
Because
Don
you
Smith.
won't have because you won't have to be refueling because the water just goes back into
Yeah, you just
the
take
HHO.
the little bit of water vapor. I mean, with a cup, say a cup with half a glass of water, maybe take your car 200 miles. I mean, the engine would have to be adapted so it could work with water, because at the moment engines tend to run the this guy that I told you about who's doing the HHO. He's running his car on 25% or 20 to 25% HHO, and he's getting the exhaust pipe is rusting away after about a year or two, so he's having to replace the exhaust pipe. So you'd have to adapt the engine so it could run on water, because at the
So it
moment they
probably
have
would
to.
have to be a lot more high high heat resistant, maybe plastic or other type
Plastic, yeah,
stainless
yeah,
steel components.
yeah, yeah. You'd have to be sort of components that can handle water and won't rust away as a result. But so the Don Smith device, which is basically coils, transformer coils, and capacitors. This is quite an impressive free energy device, which has a coefficient of performance of 13,000. So it's like over 13,000 times over unity. So for every joule of energy you put in, for every watt you put in, you're getting over 13,000 watts out.
Wow.
The guy, so this was using Tesla coils, and also this guy Don Smith, he got the idea from Tesla's work.
I mean,
Um,
that's an incredible amount of
that's just a
energy.
clever
Thirteen
trick with
thousand
coils.
times is
13,000. That's one of the most impressive free energy devices. You could use it to run your house, your office, a bit of industry, a car, or something like that. If it was adapted properly. Um, so in its simplest form, it's just in its simplest form, it's just like two coils, a primary coil and a secondary coil, and that's in its very most simplest form. So if I was reading here, Don Smith points to an even more clearly demonstrated occurrence of this effect in the Tesla coil. A typical Tesla coil, the primary coil is much larger diameter than the inner secondary coil. For example, 8,000 volts is applied to the primary coil, which has 4 turns. Then each turn would have 2,000 volts of potential. Each turn of the primary coil transfers electromagnetic flux to every single turn of the secondary winding, and the secondary coil has a very large number of turns. Massively more power is produced in the secondary coil than is used to energize the primary coil. A common mistake is to believe that the Tesla coil can't produce serious amperage. if the primary coil is positioned in the middle of the secondary coil, as shown, then the amperage generated will be as large as the voltage generated. A low input of primary coil can produce kilowatts of usable electrical power, as described in Chapter 5 of the free energy of Patrick Kelly's free energy book. So that's just in its simplest form. They're using capacitors and other electronics to try and make it more efficient. Um,
And
so
why now?
that's
Why is that important about amperage? Because we know that amperage is the strength of an electric current, but why is that important? Because volts are like the pressure that moves things along. Why would that be important for them to mention amperage and the fact that it's mistaken that the Tesla coil cannot produce enough amperage?
the primary coil is positioned in the middle of the secondary coil, as shown. Then the amperage generated will be as large as the voltage generated. Yeah, to tell you the truth, I don't know a lot about. I've studied it a bit, but I don't know a lot about this. But this is the claim that they're making, and I've seen one of the guys in our Facebook group has made a demonstration Don Smith device. From my understanding, amperage is like if you've got a coil which is if you've got a wire, electric wire, which is high amperage, that's going to produce a lot of heat, and if there's a large amperage going through it, it will give off a lot of heat.
That's the
That's
and
what I
that's
understand.
and that
Whereas if it's
demonstrates
so, it could
the use
be if you've got say a 40-watt light bulb, and if you've got say 40 watts, you can make the voltage very high and the amperage very low. So you can get a very high voltage but a very small current, very small current.
right.
And so this is the idea with free energy, with you were talking about anti-gravity, is that you don't necessarily need a lot of power, a vast amount of power. You can have a moderate amount of power, but if you make the voltage very high and the current very small, then you can just have a moderate amount of power. You can just produce the high voltage. That will be done by transformers.
Right.
So the main thing about this is that it's saying that a low power input of the primary core can produce. So this is just a clever trick. So I think this is when we get into cognitive dissonance, because a lot of these devices, some of them are very simple. An 8-year-old child can make one. Someone was saying, "Well, someone get me an 8-year-old child." There's a certain amount of there's the will, there's the desire to get up. One has to actually get up and make them. And a lot of people are still trying to get around their heads, but this thing is actually real. I mean, um, um, I tried making a magnetic motor a few years ago, and it didn't work. Probably, from what I understand, the speaker magnet as the center magnet with the ring of magnets around the edge, with one magnet taken out. The the speaker magnet I was using as a central magnet with the shaft to rotate, that has to be magnetized in the correct way. If it's not magnetized correctly, it won't work. That was one of my supervisors at university was telling me. So this is what I've described here in the proof of principle of the Don Smith device. This is very simple, and it just requires someone. I mean, who's and I think a number of people have made them and got them working. But if you try to take it to university, why don't the universities make them, or the electric company? Well, some of them might be making them, but they might not be allowed to further the research in them. That's my understanding of it. It may not
Well,
be.
in the United States, um, I read recently because I was looking for more work on specifically anti-gravity, and I found an Army Research Laboratory paper from 2003, a NASA research paper that referenced that Army Research Laboratory paper in 2004, And
Mhm,
then in 2010, another paper from two other scientists, one from Portugal and one from Brazil,
mhm,
and they all mentioned, T. Townsend Brown, but they said that the effect that they were getting had to do with ion flow and basically collisions of discharge
mhm.
from the capacitors that were colliding with the air in the atmosphere. So basically, they were just basically saying the thrust that we're getting, which is very little, and even though we've given some specifics on how to engineer new devices for this, it's basically collision, which is basically thrust as we know it. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So they were saying there's nothing special about these asymmetrical capacitor thrusters, and so
And I think Paul
uh,
was actually saying that it may be possible to break the third law. The third law for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. I think he was trying to do that with the Nasica's thruster. The
and that's
Nasica's
what my
thruster.
point
I mean,
is.
that didn't that I think according to conventional physics it should work, but according to subquantum kinetics, um, it didn't work in this. It made sense that it didn't work in this particular case. So he was using a magnetic field at angles, a coil with a kind of coil bent at one side, straight in the middle, and then bent at the other side. And from what I understand, I may be wrong, but what I understand that was if I think Paul thought now they didn't get that one to work, and they may have got some things wrong about it, or Paul had said, well, it was a bit disappointing that it didn't work, but subquantum kinetics can explain why it doesn't work, but conventional physics seems to indicate that it does work. Anyway, subquantum kinetics, he says, explains why it doesn't work. But I think that Paul was talking about devices that can break the third law. That for every action there's an equal
Right.
opposite reaction.
And,
Just lift
and
off.
and that's why when I was looking into it, I actually the one video that I had sent to you, it said it's not anti-gravity and it's not propulsion because propulsion is making use of the third law, whereas these systems are of electrogravitics
Yeah.
are really creating a field that basically does away with inertia because you're not having that equal and opposite reaction.
Mhm.
You're moving the entire system together in unison, and therefore you don't have to deal with any of those external forces that prohibit, for example, how much speed you can use, how much momentum you can apply to a craft, and how much energy. But I think that one of the things that he mentions in that book is that a lot of it, as you were saying, it has been done, but it's been pushed sort of underground.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think
and
there's been thousands of experiments done. I mean, there've been thousands of experiments done by sort of especially lone researchers, maybe even scientists. They may not be allowed to do it at the university, but there may be a number of scientists who just in their backyards, in their sheds at home, in their backyards at home, they dabble with free energy and anti gravity. They just wouldn't be able to talk about it at university. Just keep it quiet, you know.
well,
I think
it's
there's
difficult.
thousands of experiments done. It's just that it just hasn't quite got into the mainstream properly yet. I mean, so they wouldn't be
I,
they would have to be political about it and not talk about it or just deny it or whatever. But I'm sure there are some scientists who dabble with it in their spare time. They just
well,
don't.
I
They
know
just
that.
deny it if you ask them.
Yeah, it might sound kind of paranoid, but as a side note, I remember there was a time when I was actually talking about creating lifters and discs, and on the phone, and my phone started getting tapped, and I was getting followed for a while. And I thought that was really strange. I was like, why would anybody want to bug me? I'm just talking about something, and
Yeah,
and I started having a lot of strange things start going on that was very obvious. Like as if somebody was trying to let me know that we're listening to and watching. And I thought that's really weird. And this was many years ago. It must have been. It was probably right around when secretive anti-gravity propulsion first came out. And I think that some people might, I don't know. I was sort of surprised at how well I thought I understood it. I mean, I understand a lot better now, but, um, and,
Paul,
especially looking more into, I started doing courses in electricity and electronics and mathematics and just specifically focusing on those areas and in chemistry as well, because I saw the benefits of that. But
Paul had
it's been a
said to us
fascinating
one
journey.
time. Paul had said to us one time in the meetings that he had angered a lot of people in high places producing the anti-gravity book. So
Well, he reverse engineered the B was it the B-2 bomber in
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yep, and showed and actually what's interesting about that is that he's correct. I checked. So he showed in the book that the wings of the B-2 bomber was electrified and that it was displacing the air and everything around the wings. So it's one of the reasons why it's able to go faster and it's quieter because it's not having to deal with as much of the drag, um,
Mhm.
which is one of the features of it. And then actually, I don't remember which paper it was. It was either the NASA paper or one of them. But they actually some I actually saw it mentioned, so it finally came out that yeah, the it was actually mentioned with those words that the B-2 bomber is an electrogravitic system, and that was and that's in mainstream scientific literature, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. They actually finally said it.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. government has admitted that UFOs are real. They're just saying they don't know what they are, but they
Right.
probably do. They're just saying they're saying, well, we don't really know what they are. I mean, they may not know that much, but I think they know more than what they're saying. But they're admitting now that that UFO UAPs are real, and
Yeah,
before they never.
they've changed the term to UAPs now, and they've had several people. I know of at least two former intelligence officers and a couple of pilots who've. There were three of them, one intelligence officer and two pilots who testified in United States Congress, um, and then another former, and they were, they're known as whistleblowers, and another former intelligence officer, Lou Elizondo, and several people who said, yeah, he definitely, and then they've shown the videos and everything like that. But as far as free energy goes, do you think that, in your opinion, I know that we can't know this because we're not, you and I personally are not in possession of any extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence vehicles, but do you think that they make use of anything similar to these kind of electrogravitic systems that are described in Dr. LaViolette's work, SubQuantum Kinetics, or anything like that, or is it you think it's
I mean,
much more advanced?
I think there's some of them, the more low level ones, maybe. I mean, I think with extraterrestrial vehicles, I mean, I think that some of them may be just as Stephen Greer was saying, some of these civilizations may be very advanced, and they would be using more advanced stuff than this. But on the sort of next level up from our physics, for our conventional physics, the next level up to electrogravitics, I think maybe maybe from the say like Roswell information about a certain number of the ETs may be using electrogravitics and maybe some more advanced stuff. But if you go up to the higher level ET civilizations, they're probably using sort of like trans-dimensional devices and sort of
You know,
interfacing with
it's been
consciousness and things
it,
like that. I mean,
it's been mentioned before that just the use of electricity and electronics is in itself hyperdimensional. What do you
the
think about
use of
that?
yeah. I mean, what yeah. So what you so these kind of electrogravitic and free energy devices, they could be tapping into. They just be some clever electronics and clever mechanics that's tapping into a higher dimension, or the ether or the 0 point. So they're just the way they're designed. It's just a clever trick that can tap into some kind of higher dimension of draw energy from, say, the 0 point or some higher dimension, or some people prefer just to say just from from the environment or the ether. So, which is which can't be explained by the standard physics. So we're having to go to Paul's work to get an idea of Paul Laviolette's work to get an idea of how these things may be working.
Do you think that, for example, you'll ever be able to see a time when some of this information is made available to the public, or that will you think, first of all, will you be able to, um, in your lifetime, see yourself help make any breakthroughs, or have free energy be implemented in?
I mean, some people say that some people say there are companies that are actually making over unity energy, such as water fueled cells or magnetic motors. They just haven't, and they're making it sort of like a semi undercover. So I think that, and also, I mean, one of the guys in our group thinks that water fueled cells are quite well. You can actually, there are people who can buy kits and actually make them. But I mean, in my lifetime, I think that they're certainly allowing a lot of this. They're not clamping down totally. They're allowing this information to come out. They're not censoring me. I mean, in the past, some free energy researchers have been killed, but a number of them haven't. So they're allowing this information out so that scientists at university can look it up and look at it, and they may not be able to make it at their university, but they can make it in their homes if they want to, or investigate it. So I think it's. I mean, you could say that where some sort of mystic seers have said that the Dark Age was 700 BC to 1700, and they were only at the beginnings of, say, the Bronze Age or the Dwapar Yuga, 1700. So we only got into the Bronze Age. This is just speculation, but
Right.
in 1900 we properly got in. We only got into the Bronze Age properly in 1900. So we're only just out of the Kali Yuga or the Dark Age, and they say when we get properly into the Bronze Age, it will be like Star Trek. It'd be
Wow.
similar to a Star Trek civilization. And one of the guys in our group, Eddie, he thinks he's working with Sabadi Aerospace and with guys who are working on these anti gravity devices, and he thinks that we'll enter a Star Trek civilization within 20 years. So anything's possible. It may not be. That may not happen. It may happen. Anything's possible. I think, but
Now, it's interesting because, a lot of times we're we're talking about free energy, and anti-gravity continually pops into the conversation. Are these two things just intrinsically, are they just almost impossible to disconnect from each other? Because, you know, you look at like 1972, Harvey Weinberg and some others, Yusuf Salam, they won the Nobel Prize because they unified the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and electricity and magnetism, sort
yeah,
of looking at like a winding back of the cosmic clock of how the forces, the further you go back, it shows that the forces were really one, but they still haven't been able to combine gravity into that. So why is it that gravity so often comes up with free energy? Why do you think that is?
I think the main with the conventional model they can't, because gravity is described by general relativity in conventional physics, and in the quantum level they can't unify quantum mechanics with general relativity. They just don't agree. So they can't understand gravity on the quantum level. It doesn't compute. It doesn't they it doesn't um they can't find a quantum explanation for gravity. If if
Right.
they did that, they would there'll be like celebrations around the world that they found the so-called ultimate theory. I mean, I don't know how ultimate it would be, but that's one of their big. This is what string theory was all about: was trying to find a
Right.
quantum gravity, unify
But
relativity with
string
quantum
theory has
mechanics.
kind of kind of gone by the wayside for a lot of people, really. But but in subquantum
It
kinetics,
pauses as much. Yeah, go on.
yeah, subquantum kinetics does seem to show that gravity is simply another, you know, another feature of electricity and magnetism, at least the way that I've started to understand it. That just the same how, as you wind back the cosmic clock, you get electricity and magnetism becoming one with the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, which is interesting because the strong nuclear force, even though it acts over a very small distance of the nucleons and between the quarks and that whole quark C nonsense that's going on, but um, it it seems that it's very similar to, like, it's been called, like, the gluons have been called the brothers of the photon, right? Because they are the mediators of the strong nuclear force, whereas the photons, mediate electromagnetism, and then you
Yeah,
have the weak nuclear force is a radiation, and so they're all basically the same. So why would gravity not be another, uh, another feature of that? And it's just that it takes a
I
different way of
can't
looking at
remember
it.
exactly what it is about, but I can't remember what it is. I mean, I think that gravity is much weaker than
Yes,
electromagnetism. It's
definitely.
much weaker, and I think it's difficult to detect on the microscopic level. But Paul is. I think there are kind of like different physics models. There's the conventional model, which which works with a certain limited framework. But then there could be other physics. There could be Nassim Harame's Schwarzschild proton holographic mass. There could be like and subquantum kinetics or electric universe. Or there could be other physics models because in subquantum kinetics we don't have quarks. So the
Right.
universe could be some kind of multi hologram where one hologram is showing one aspect of things, another hologram is showing it in a different way. So the universe
Yeah.
could be mystic, could be mystic. It could be
Well,
just endless models to
well,
describe it, going
Brendan,
deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah,
you,
go on.
you know that, I mean, even standard model of physics doesn't really have quarks. They just theorize that they're there and assign them the two-thirds, magnetic charge that they have. But updated theories have said that there's a sea of quarks, and there's really not just three of them, but there might be five, and
Yeah,
at any given time they pop in and out. And so it's again the same thing that we get from quantum physics all the time, is that, is it there or not there? It's a probability cloud. It's like those um it's like QED, quantum electrodynamics, from Richard P. Feynman, and where they talk about phantom particles, like the right phantom, photons that are they there or they're not there, right?
it could just be looking at the universe, different models, just looking at the universe from a different angle. They're just looking at nature at a different angle, and they're seeing a different aspect of things. And they may
Yeah,
be. It could be like Ptolemy's epicycles. We know that in Ptolemy's astronomy, he thought he thought the sun and the planets revolved around the Earth,
right,
and he had this brilliant mathematical system which showed how the sun, the moon, and the planets revolved around the Earth, and he produced epicycles within epicycles of mathematics to explain it in more and more detail. It was a brilliant mathematical model that explained where the sun and the moon and the planets would be. The only trouble was it was wrong. So
yeah,
quarks could be like that. They could be just like Ptolemy's astronomical system. They could explain where certain things are. When it comes down to it, it may just be wrong. It just may appear to be correct when it's not in
right.
fact correct.
Well, there's a lot of things like that, and um, I'm glad, though. One of the things that really got me to continue studying more and more science, and I'm a very mystically minded person. I dabble in Viking runes and numerology, and I'm shamanism and all these types of things, tarot cards. I look into all kinds of metaphysical subjects, but what I found is that you don't really need to go beyond science to find things that seem to be mystical or magical. I mean, if you just look at quantum physics and the stuff that comes out every day and the things
Mm.
that people even win Nobel Prizes for, the stuff that they're writing, it's and how quickly it changes all the time is mind blowing. It's like it's I feel like scientists like we now are it's like it's Hogwarts. It's it's when you start learning mathematics, it's a whole new universe that opens to you.
Yep, yep, and where we've got our own mathematical system, and there may be other maths. There may be just more advanced maths that we're not aware of. You know, so but our
So,
mathematical system is quite. I mean, it's quite advanced. Um, but
Brandon, you've got 10 seconds here. You can come right back up so we can close out soon. But yeah, continue that thought. You've got a few
yeah, I
seconds, and
mean,
then
there could be like hieroglyphics could be a form of.
all right. So Brandon's timed out there. Brandon, you can just please go ahead and click back in here because the timer ran out. Can't believe we've gone an hour. So I've been talking to Brendan Derer over there in England, and we've just been having a casual conversation about, really he wanted to speak about free energy, but I get excited about the subquantum kinetics of Paul Élo Violette, and so we just got talking about a little bit of these things here, and it's a fascinating subject. So Brandon, if you can hear me, you just gotta go ahead and click the button again. There you go. Um, and it's something that has occupied my mind now for at least it's been quite a while now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Welcome back. Yes.
Okay, great.
But yeah, so you were saying when the timer when you timed out that
Yep.
there's a lot of different ways to look at these different theories and science and the
Yeah, there may
mathematics
be,
that we
there may be conventional standard physics can explain a certain amount, quite well, but there may be other models, the different models that may be contradictory, but they're still telling a truth about the universe, and about nature. So there may be many different models, and may just go on. I mean, the physicist David Bohm thought that physics just went on forever and ever. There were just more and more. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So
do you agree with that?
yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it's like I think Einstein thought disagreed with Bowman. He thought there was one complete theory that explained everything, but I think it's quite possible it just goes on and on and on. Just goes deeper and deeper, and then it's just mystical. It's just like the universe is a mystic. It's like the source. The source and the universe are kind of very similar. But one and the same, I suppose.
I Yeah, I tend to think that I have this thing where I say that all knowledge and all power is in all places at all times. And I tend to think in those terms of more of an open rather than a closed system. I think
Yeah,
of things more of being eternal rather than finite. And it actually helps me to make sense of a lot of things that sometimes people get wrong because they're thinking too much about of the universe or our existence in a closed system.
yeah. And standard physics is based on closed systems. The thermal laws of thermodynamics are based on a closed. I mean, maybe you can apply a closed system to a refrigerator, but then you
Right,
can't then apply a refrigerator to the rest of the universe. So, I
right.
mean, it's an open. I think it's an open system where um, um, we can't really. I mean, to the creator, infinity may be easy to understand. For us, infinity is difficult to understand, but for the source or the creator, it might be just straightforward.
It's somewhat the opposite for me because I have a difficult time understanding something being finite.
Yeah,
infinity, eternity, makes more sense to me than
yeah,
anything else. It actually helps me to, whenever I hear a lot of ideas now, when people talk about things, me simply thinking in terms of something never ending, of it always going on, it actually helps me to answer a lot of questions.
yeah.
Like,
So plus infinity, we can sort of vaguely understand, we can vaguely imagine, we can imagine infinity, and it just seems, but to a higher being or to a more advanced being or to the creator or the source, just imagine what they that being or that energy, it can see much more than us, 'cause, so
now,
that's what.
wouldn't that open system be more appropriate to free energy in that type of
The
thinking?
open system free energy, so it's coming from outside, from an up, from I like to think of it as a higher dimension. Some people don't like higher dimensions, and they can think of it as coming from the environment or the ether or the 0 point energy field. 0 point energy is like an empty glass of vacuum has enough energy to evaporate the world's ocean. I think it was Feynman who said that. Richard Feynman who said that.
Yeah.
An empty glass of vacuum of the size of a glass has enough energy in it to evaporate the world's oceans. So I think that the supply of energy is infinite, and it just goes to higher dimensions. There may be many higher dimensions than we can imagine. So
Definitely.
it just goes on and on.
Well,
And David Bohm, he was quite a significant physicist who developed the ideas of the implicate order and
mm,
consciousness and matter being one whole. And he thought the physical reality just went on forever and ever. The physical models or the physics just went deeper and deeper and deeper and never ended.
well, I could go on forever and ever with you, but I want to be respectful of your time, and also I've got things to do as well, and I want us to be able to come back and have a talk again, and um, maybe go deeper into free energy, and also talk more about what you're doing with the book, the SubQuantum Kinetics. And before you do go, where can people find more information about SubQuantum Kinetics, and how are you involved with the Starburst Foundation?
Well, I'm the CEO of the Starburst Foundation. We have a vice president and a treasurer and a secretary, and we have the Model G. So it's just a group of people around the world behind a computer, and we just register as a non-profit research institute, and we have two websites, etheric.com and starburstfound.org, and you can find us on Facebook under the Model G. If you just type in, um, whoopsie, let me see if I can get it right here. Model
And you know what I'll
G.
do? I'll actually post all this stuff. I'm going to put this on YouTube as well as on my podcast on Spreaker. So I'll put all.
Yeah, it says Model G Vortical Motion Group. Are you there?
Sorry, somebody was
Sorry.
calling
All
me.
right.
But yeah, you have etheric.org,
Ether, ether,
ETHERIC.
etheric.com and starburstfound.org
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Model G Vortical Motion Group on Facebook.
yeah. Model G Vortical Group on Facebook. Got it. And I'll make sure that I put those links into the YouTube video when I make this on YouTube and also on Spreaker, so people can check that out. And I am really glad that you took the time to talk to me today. Um,
Okay, it was great
and
chatting to you. Thanks.
let's get into more deeply into free energy. I want to learn a lot more. We'll have a chat again, and I definitely want to talk to you more about um, getting involved with the research that you're doing with uh, with Starburst.
Mhm.
So we'll
Okay,
talk
that's
about
great.
that. So thank you everybody for listening. I appreciate whoever came through the room. We've got Debbie Wellslager, Charlotte Pauletti, Daryl with the dashes is here. Hello. Mike Anderson, Kerry Hansen, Sandra Collins, Mary A. Frank, Joho, Neri Drory, Toot Vongpanya, Waylon Unruh, Laura Strader. Hello. Coach J.L. Fields, Brenda Daniels, Tanya, Tina Mazzaroli, Jennifer Reynolds, Ben Peterson, Ronald Snyder, Sarah Simons, Lynn Miller, Willie Frazier, Michael Pierce, Tamara Damon, Sarah Lee, Donna Richards, Christopher Capriti, Vadim Nebasui, Michael Mallon, Audrey Smith, Kathy Alps, hello, Michelle Lindsay, Donna McDaniel, Tina Goodrich, Craig King, Sharon Polozewski, Nilu Acharya, Sudoku Moth, hello, how you doing? Long time. Allison Crow, Vic, Lonnie G, Maria Gelabert, Mojo, hello, Mojo's in the house, Clifford, Van Nostrand, Monica Adelot, Coach Dana, hello, Doobie, what's up, Doobie? Susan Backdrop, Wandering Fool, long time too. Kristen Brown, hey, how you guys doing? The OGs, Jordan and Chris Anthony, thank you for listening. I know this was a really candid conversation. We didn't really plan much. It's just that I've been wanting to talk to Brandon Darrah for a long time about subquantum kinetics, and he suggested free energy. And you guys know I'm a geek, and I get really excited about this stuff. So we're going to come back at some point in time when we do have time and talk again. But I think that this is a really great subject and that it should be looked at more deeply. So Brendan, thank you very much to you once again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Hakeem. It was great to chat to you. Thank you very much.
Be well.